On this episode of the Layover Live, Sandee Jordan stops by to talk about telling your destination story. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 186 of the Layover Live. I'm Jason Swick, VP of Strategy and Insights, and thank you once again for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We really do appreciate it. Now, we're talking storytelling, and who does not like a good story? Now, as a destination marketer, we often find success when we create content that resonates with travelers at some emotional level. I mean, think of past campaigns like What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas, where Vegas connects with our inner desire to just let it go and have a good time without fear of being judged. And it's not just with campaign slogans, as good storytelling-based marketing campaigns like Vegas's evoke that feeling, which then leads to increased engagement and brand loyalty, and hopefully a booking or vacation to your destination. Now, here to talk about content and storytelling is my dear friend, Sandee Jordan. So Sandee, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's been a minute.
It has been a little bit, but you know, I'm thinking back to like Summit, Sandee, which was not too long ago, and I was checking out your session, which I really enjoyed, which was how content journeys lead to like actual journeys, and you had some really good examples, and we'll get into some of those a little bit, but it really talks about this importance of really a destination telling their story. And so let's just, jump right into it. I think as DMOs out there start to think about, developing their content journeys for their audience, and they start to build that out, why is it important then for a DMO to really tell their story?
Yeah, well, high quality content, or the storytelling, literal copy part, it's not just great for SEO, which of course it is, but having that useful information that conveys a story and is presented contextually in a relevant manner, it's the most critical element to a travel brand's success. And the whys are kind of wrapped up in three categories, and it starts essentially with connecting with the audience, which is the most important thing that your brand can do. You need that ongoing conversation with your audience in order to build those champions. And then those champions become your storytellers, and they're sharing their experiences. And it just makes your job that much easier. But you have to connect with your audience in an authentic way. So that next factor, of course, is authenticity. So making sure that your uniqueness is shining through in these stories. You're not just checking a box and writing content just so content gets written or videos get produced. It's all a part of a mission to show the world your authentic self. And one great example of a travel brand that's really hit authenticity hard with their new brand is what was previously San Mateo County, Silicon Valley Convention and Visitor Bureau, which is a mouthful, I know. And one of the things that we first looked at when we started working with them was the name, because even as an acronym, all of those letters just turn into, vegetable soup or alphabet soup. It's hard to figure out exactly where they are. Just hearing the name didn't give a sense of place. And when we started diving into the research and seeing that a lot of people call that area San Francisco Peninsula. And it just made a whole lot of sense. Let's go with the authentic name of that area based on the people who are there, who know the area, based on what they call it. So it became a very important part of their branding and their identity to embrace their basic name. So we rolled them into this new era of the San Francisco Peninsula. Their site is live today, so you guys can check that out. And they've just been doing a wonderful job of really capturing in photo, in video, as well as in copy on their website, what it means to visit the San Francisco Peninsula and embracing all parts of their culture. Another good example of authenticity, you can see very clearly in an example video from the Thailand Tourism Authority. And the video is called I Hate Thailand. And it's just a couple minutes long. If you do just a quick YouTube search for I Hate Thailand, it'll pop right up for you. But it's such a great story and extremely authentic to the experience that you have when you visit Thailand. And actually, the guys guy's pretty upset through like half of the video. He lost his wallet, he lost his bag, he doesn't speak the language, he's having just a miserable time. And then he starts to embrace the experience of being there and how warm and open the people are there. And everybody started pitching in to, give him a place to charge his phone. He got some food. He got to hang out with the locals. And by the end of the video, he finds his bag and then decides, you know what, I love this place so much, I'm never leaving. And he moves there, which is extreme, right? We're not trying to get people to move to our destinations, but it's a really great example of how you can be upfront and honest. In that particular piece of marketing, they weren't saying that you're going to get the glitz and glamour, of like a New York City. You're not going to see, mountain ranges and snow peak valleys. And, you're not going to have a skiing experience there. They're not faking the experience at all. It is very rustic, and they are very bold and upfront about the experience you're going to have there. But it really warms your heart to see that story, and you can see yourself having that true experience. So being authentic is the number one way you're going to connect with that audience. And then the third factor, of course, is brand awareness. So when somebody navigates to your site, they're seeing the colors and the textures that actually exist in your destination. You are making a representation of what it's like to be in the destination, not just in the template, not just in the copy, but with video and with the communication that you have going back and forth with your audience. And that spreads deep into social and into your email marketing programs. And it should be the driving force for your entire marketing plan.
Yeah, Sandee, I love that, right? Talking about connecting with your audience. I think that's ultra important. More important, which you touched on, was authenticity. I think the Thailand video was really good because they told the story, they owned who they were not trying to pretend to be something else. But you want to talk about an emotional driver in that. You could, the way it was written, you could really make that emotional connection of how the person's feeling, like frustrating, right? You go to a place and you lose something of greater importance, and everyone could feel that frustration. When we were talking about that at Summit, and you shared this video the first time, and then talking about the feelings of coming out of it and how you started to connect with the locals. It was such an emotional video that was put together in such a short period of time. So I love that, connecting with the audience, that authenticity, which then builds that awareness. Just own who you are. Right. I think is something that's really important. So let's get into then the content itself, right? Yeah. And thinking about, ways that DMOs can do this, because content is just such an ambiguous word, and it means lots of different things. So let's pull that out of the sky a little bit and maybe talk about some ways that DMOs can do that. Maybe you could just share some things that you've seen of late that are successful.
I mean, it's so cliche, right? But content is king. Content is everything. You could have, the most beautiful template on the most sophisticated CMS, but if you don't have the content there to support it, the whole system falls apart, right? So still tried and true. And I know we've been hammering this since I started in this industry a decade ago. Blogs really still do a lot to influence and fulfill those micro touches that you need for your audience to give them the sense of place and to get them excited about visiting a destination. What's great about blogs is that you can make them very specific to a key point, a factor that you're trying to drive. Maybe you've got some KPIs around a certain segment in your member partner group. Maybe you're very focused on restaurant week. Instead of cluttering up your sitemap with additional initiatives, you build those into your blog, because a blog page can stand just as strong as any of your top level pages. And it facilitates a place to tell that story in a very unique way, in a very specific place. So blogs still are king. I encourage everyone to continue writing them. Finding someone who has the talent to write about a true experience is going to be very important. And blogs are going to talk, again, about very specific topics. The next step from that, and I think what the most exciting direction that DMOs are going in today is with short form video through TikTok and Instagram Reels. There is an article by TechCrunch who talks about how these Google execs were sharing that Instagram and TikTok are eating into their core products being search, Google search, and maps. Almost 40% of Gen Zers are relying on TikTok and IG searches rather than Google. That is huge. And when we think about like the origins of marketing and how it started with, snake oil salesmen and people going door to door, it was really about the excitement of the moment. And you didn't necessarily need to trust the source. It was just exciting to have somebody trying to sell you something because it was new. And then consumers started catching on to that. And they said, hey, we need some proof of life here. We need to know that, you're not just selling me snake oil. And then we started moving more into endorsement. So we had celebrity endorsement, and then we had cartoons that were, getting people excited about particular brands and products. Think of like Tony the Tiger, this idea that we need somebody who we admire to tell us the story. From there, we started moving more into the bandwagon effect, right? Because consumers catch on. Once something becomes a strategy that is repeated over and over again, consumers start to realize that. From there, we started moving into looking at more reviews. We wanted to hear word of mouth. We wanted to hear people talking about the product that they're using because we didn't trust the marketing team that was telling us about it. People are starting to catch on to that as well, because of course, it is very easy to fake a review and consumers know that. So now we're moving into seeing more of a visual proof of life from people that have no skin in the game. They're just having fun creating videos on TikTok. So a lot of younger consumers would prefer to do a quick search on TikTok to see what kind of videos are being made about that particular restaurant or that particular attraction, because the experience there was so great that somebody got excited and created, shot and edited and created a 30-second video to share their experience. And that now speaks to true authenticity. And it doesn't look like there's a marketing team behind them telling that story. And that's why it's become so wildly popular. But younger generations, they're definitely leaning towards that short form video. They take in information very quickly. Their attention spans are much shorter. And I think that trend is going to continue. So making sure that you've got some sort of short form video strategy in your marketing plan is going to become more and more critical.
Yeah, good stuff there, Sandee. I think, you talked about, in the first question, you talked about authenticity. I think TikTok's a great way to be authentic, and you touched on that really, really well. I think, it's becoming such a great source to be able to really address how the user behavior has changed, right? Mobile has changed that. People now are impatient, right? And they want things now. And they want it also personalized, right? And we're living more online than we ever have before with this acceleration of digital transformation and all these other things that are happening in the space. I think about even when I go to like a new destination now, oftentimes, if I'm with my wife, she'll actually use TikTok as a way to search new restaurants and things of that nature, because it is such a good source for those kind of things, and it's authentic.
And the experience doesn't have to end specifically, on TikTok itself. We can pull in some of that short form video in many different ways onto the website, which is great for expanding that footprint. We don't want to just target one particular audience, but repurposing content then becomes important as we get into creating stronger and more demanding content plans. We're going to have to find ways to repurpose that content. CrowdRiff has a really great feature where they feature reels in the form of their local hood stories, and they live directly, on the site, which makes them both evergreen and easy to access. You don't have to be on a particular platform. You can pick it up in your IG feed, or you can pick it up on the website as well. So Visit Temecula has a top 10 things to do page, and that is a really great example of using those IG reels to bolster the story that you're telling on your site.
Yeah, I love that. So we've talked about creating the content right, connecting with that audience, being authentic, doing that. We now talked about some additional areas that are working really, really well around blogs, which I think always do well, right? Because we get a little bit more freedom with blogs, a little bit, right, outside of our brand, allows us to expand or bring guest writers in, things of that nature. TikTok's another way. So now we've got ways to amplify that message. Let's talk about measuring the effectiveness now of those content marketing efforts. Can you share some ways of doing that? I know that's top of mind for a lot of DMOs, is really helping to prove the value of those marketing efforts and making sure that what they're doing is resonating and leading to driving demand to their generation, or to their destinations rather. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. You know, what's tried and true and will never go away is just traditional web analytics. Right. So being able to use filters to make a connection between particular content topics and the conversions that are happening from the users that are consuming those topics, that will always be one of the strongest ways to determine the effectiveness of the content. And then, of course, overall, you're looking at things like engagement, so time on site, how many pages someone is looking at, and then how often they're coming back to the site. So those metrics will always stay tried and true. But as we get into more short form video, looking at TikTok analytics, for example, the platform itself will allow you to see your follower growth, your video views, how many profile views, likes, shares, and comments. Now, it's important to note that you're only going to get 60 days of analytics from that platform. So you're going to need to push that into a Sprout Social or something similar in order to retain all of that data. But it gives you a lot of insight into who's viewing your content and how they're responding to it. And of course, having that consistent communication with your audience via your social channels is one of the easiest ways to get sentiment. Sure, there are a lot of companies out there that will have some sophisticated algorithms that can really dive in deep and do a study of your brand's sentiment online. But one of the fastest and easiest ways is to do it yourself and have that communication through your social channels with your audience. You want people talking about the destination. And I understand that also feeds for negative comments, because once you start having that conversation, you have to be ready to take those negative comments as well. But we just talked about a video, I Hate Thailand, where half this video was about how awful this place was and how he's never coming back again. And he was able to turn that story into something very positive that was very, very successful in bringing interest to the destination. So we have to embrace the good with the bad, encourage the conversation, and have that open dialogue with your audience. It's the fastest way to understand sentiment. And then, of course, things like testing, A/B testing will always be a critical element to figuring out, is my content plan successful? And that's doing things like making dynamic changes to pieces of content to see what's going to be more effective with your particular audience. And that can change. It can change over time, and it can change over micro segments of your audience as well. You might have maybe an older generation of your audience that is not really going to get into short form video, which means that you're going to need a blog version of the video that you're posting to engage both types of audiences that might be interested in the same thing, but they're consuming that content in different ways.
Yeah, even different ways, or even just different stages of their path
of their journey. Right? Absolutely. Yeah, where they are in the funnel.
You got it totally, right? Because if we're kind of looking for that quick demand or inspiration, certainly TikTok's great for that. When we start to pull things back and start to consider a destination more, the blog certainly makes sense in that case, or longer form content. All really good examples and good advice there, Sandee. So tying that all back together, let's talk about advice then. What other advice do you have in wrapping this up for DMOs to really help improve their content marketing efforts around storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the golden rule of if you fail to plan, you plan to fail definitely holds true here. You absolutely need a content roadmap or calendar of some kind for the organization. If you don't have one today, I would say start off very slowly. Commit to creating 2 blog posts a month. Do them every 2 weeks. And before you get started with that calendar, create 6 to 8 of them just to have in the can to get you started. That way, while you are creating this cadence and this habit, the muscle memory of I'm going to post every 2 weeks, you've got a backlog of content that can keep you on that journey. So if you have a bad week, you've got a piece that you can just throw out there. and then grow that and challenge yourself more and more often. Again, content is going to be the biggest piece of what you do every day. It's not something to leave to an intern. It's not something to leave as a second thought. It really should be the dominating force of any marketing plan. Create many pieces to have that backlog and then start building on that. Once you've got a year where you've consistently been posting every 2 weeks, bump that up to every 3 weeks, and then start incorporating video. Video does not need to come from a professional crew with professional cameras. You've got all the power that you need right in your pocket. You've got your phone, and your team, your staff, they have their phones. Start collecting that video when they're out and about in the destination. Run contests in the area to get great footage from locals or from people who are visiting the destination, and start cutting that footage up into 10 to 30-second videos. Use voiceover, use music to your advantage, make something inspiring and exciting because your audience is looking for that. And if you are able to create that backlog in the front half, that should keep you going consistently, even if you have a hiccup one week. And then you can also fill that log in with any kind of new initiatives that have popped up, maybe breaking stories or new focuses for your organization. So making sure that you've got the backlog and starting with that is what's going to help you to continue your cadence, whether it's every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. I've seen some DMOs that have committed to every 2 days, which is impressive for any organization. But find a flow that works for you and for your team and create that consistent stream of content.
Good stuff there, Sandee. On that side, I think it's all really, really, really good advice. Repurposing it, crowdsourcing that content so you can get it at scale makes a lot of sense to me, right? So yeah, all good advice. We'll provide some of the links that you shared below, but I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of this. I was really excited to get you on and see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys.
You bet. And thanks for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, please do so now. We're also available on audio podcasts through Spotify and iTunes. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.